Hey, what's going on? I'm Joe from Home Studio Corner. Today, I got a question. Learner Forever left this comment on my last video. Says, what does analog, warmth, and color sound like? We, as beginners, usually hear the terms warmth and color from pros on YouTube and forums, and we understand it in theory, but unfortunately no one put it into practice and compare, then explain the findings and describe the differences, etc. I think you'll be the first one doing it on YouTube. I'm sure someone has talked about it on YouTube, but I would love to talk about that because I've had an idea for a while that I haven't done, and you gave me, Learner Forever, the impetus. I don't know what that word means, but I think it fits there. You gave me the impetus to do this video today. So what's happening today? If you look up above me, right up there, you will see a pair of microphones. I'll show them to you in a second. I have two microphones set up right next to each other. I'm gonna record a vocal with both of them recording at the same time. One of them will be running to my PreSonus mixer, which has their stock X-Max preamps. These are the preamps that are in pretty much all PreSonus mixers and audio interfaces. It's a pretty standard, clean sounding, good sounding stock preamp. Everyone should have a preamp at this quality just based on if you have a relatively new modern audio interface, you've got a preamp that sounds probably similar to that. The other microphone will be running over here to my PreSonus ADL 700. Now, it's not a commercial for that. They don't sell it anymore. But when they did, it's a tube preamp channel strip with compression and EQ and all tube circuitry. And it sold for somewhere in like the $2,000 range, maybe a little bit more. Great sounding preamp. But the big question is, if stock preamps are fine, and you can make good music with them, which that's absolutely true, then what's the point of a higher end tube preamp? What do you get from it? So rather than, as Learner Forever suggested, explaining it theoretically, let's record something and go and listen to the difference. And I'll even provide the files below so you can listen to them in your system at high fidelity and make some decisions for yourself. In a perfect world, we would have one microphone run to some sort of a box that would split it into two mic cables that we would then run to two different preamps to tell the difference. I don't have one of those boxes, and I don't think it matters all that much. What I do have are two of the exact same microphones, and I've got them as close to one another as I can physically get them, and then they're both angled towards me just a little bit, and I will be singing right here. So theoretically, they should both be getting roughly the exact same sound from my voice. Then the cables are running to the two different preamps, and we will record them into Studio One. As you may know already, I'm working on an EP of my own music. I've got a song that's pretty much ready to go, and I'll be singing the first couple of verses of that for our little experiment here today. While I'm singing, I'll mute the music and allow you to hear both microphones. So I'll switch between the two, and you can listen critically while I'm singing and decide, make some decisions for yourself as to what you think the differences in sound are, if you hear any at all. I know this is on a streaming video platform, but make sure you're listening at the highest HD level you can to get the best quality audio. Then afterward, I'll come back and tell you what I hear, and we can decide, is a $2,000 preamp even worth it?
The talk of the town, that boy got around, and the powers that be made him disappear. I took it in stride, it taught me to hide. Don't you mess up, boy, or you're out of here.
Okay, that was interesting and kind of fun. Let me share with you what I hear when I listen back to those recordings. The first and biggest thing is they're not night and day different. There is a difference, but it's not this huge, transformative, my life is forever changed because of the difference. It's subtle. It's an acquired taste even, but there is a difference. So what do I hear? When I listen to the stock preamp, first of all, it has more low end than I expect it to have. It's actually a pretty balanced sound. I've got plenty of lows, mids, and highs present. Where I really feel the tube preamp shines is in the highs and in the low mids and the lows. Here's what I mean. The stock preamp sounds a little bit plasticky up in the high frequencies. So on the sibilance of the vocal and just the air of the vocal, you might initially listen to both and say, I like the stock preamp better because it's brighter, and we tend to like brighter things better. But if you listen more closely, it's got a little bit of a shrill brittleness to the top end. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because especially on a vocal, we're going to add compression to the vocal. And when you add compression to something that's already a little sizzly up in the top end, that sizzliness becomes more and more of a problem. Compare that to the tube preamp that's got what I would call a warmer, softer sound. You can still hear the high frequencies. That's a common misconception, or something that I always thought, is for something to be warm and vintage and vibey, it has to not have any high end. And that's not necessarily true. However, it does have less high end than the stock preamp, but you can still hear all the frequencies up there above 5K. But it's just got a softer feel. You can hear my breath, you can hear there's a little bit of air to the vocal, but the sibilance isn't over the top. It's kind of been tamed a little bit, which means it'll respond really well to compression down the road because there's not this extra amount of kind of brittleness in the top end. The other thing is the low end feels deeper and fuller to me on the tube preamp versus the stock preamp. So the tube they both have a decent low end. Again, I was surprised at how nice and full and rich the stock preamp sounds. But the tube preamp it almost felt a little deeper, if that makes sense. Like there was this roundness, this expansiveness to the low end on my voice that just kind of felt really good. Those same frequencies were there, but it just had a different feel. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it just feels bigger and deeper. Does that really matter on a vocal track? No, not really, because we don't really want all those deep frequencies usually, but they do play a part, especially on a song like this where I sing that quiet at the end of the line, out of here. I'm going to turn that up in the mix, and it's going to have this warmth to it that I think I'll be able to accomplish better with the tube preamp over the stock preamp. Now, the question you might be asking is, Joe, aren't you just coming up with an excuse to justify that expensive preamp you have in your rack? And that's a valid question. The fact that that is a nice preamp and this is not a nice preamp could very well be playing into how I hear things. However, I will say from my experience, about a year ago, you may recall, I did a series of videos on how to set up a bedroom studio. Go search my channel for those if you want to see that. In that video, in the room over there, it's like a spare bedroom, I set up a small mobile recording rig using an old small PreSonus audio interface that has these stock preamps in them. And I recorded a song. It was a song that I had previously done in the studio with nice preamps and nice tube compressors. It was more difficult to mix the vocal that I had recorded on the stock preamps than it was to mix the vocal that was recorded on the tube preamps. It took more work. The tube just sounded good to begin with. Add some compression, sounds better. Add a little EQ, sounds better. The stock one, it takes a little more work. Now, the big question is, can you get good results with a stock preamp? And the answer is 100% absolutely you can. You can never own a piece of tube equipment, high-end audio equipment in your studio for your entire lifetime, and you can create a beautiful, wonderful body of work. However, if you've been doing this for a while and you can see all your skills improving and the music that you're making and putting out there is getting continuously better, then at some point you may want to consider upgrading your front end. I'd much rather get a nice preamp than spend a bunch of money on a bunch of different plug-in bundles. Plug-in bundles are cool, but as far as mixing, EQs, compressors, there's only so much you can do with those. But getting your front end right, we talk all the time about how a lot of what we do is incremental changes. If you improve just one channel of a good preamp on your front end and you record most of your stuff through that preamp like I do, then that little small change that you make on every track will add up to a big difference in the entire song, because every track has a little bit nicer sound because they all went through the nice preamp. So, I know I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Do you need a high-end preamp? No. Are they cool? Yes. Do they give you a little bit better sound? Sure. Is it more fun to sing through them and to mix them? Yeah. I can tell a difference when I'm singing. If I've got the stock preamp, it feels a little harsh and brittle. When I've got the tube preamp, it feels more like me. And that's something to consider. I know when I had Warren Hewitt in my studio doing a tour, he was talking about how the only way to test out a guitar amp is to play through it, not to reamp a signal through each amp. Even though that's scientifically the best way, a big part of what makes an amp great is how you feel playing it and then how that makes you play in response to what the amp is giving you. So that has to factor into this discussion as well. So I feel like I've said a lot of things. you can get great recordings with whatever equipment you have. If you've got a little extra money to spend and you want to up your game on the front end of things, then a nice preamp, doesn't have to be a $2,000 preamp, even $500 invested in a good standalone preamp could give you a lot of good results compared to the stock preamp. Do I still use the preamps over here? Absolutely. When I've got a big tracking session, I dedicate my favorite tracks to those preamps over there, but then the rest have to go through these, and it works out just fine. In fact, the drums that you hear in this song, all the drums except for a handful of channels were recorded using the stock preamps. The overheads, the room mics, the toms, they were all done through the stock preamps on this board, and it works wonderfully for that. So there you go. That is my take. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. After you've listened to this, go back and listen to the tracks again, having heard what I said. And you may disagree, you may agree. I don't know. I don't care. It's fine. It's your opinion. It's all subjective anyway. But also download the tracks below. There'll be a link in the description to download the tracks and listen to them in your studio. And just flip back and forth and see the difference. Maybe you don't hear a difference. If not, that's fine. Maybe you do hear a difference. Maybe you like the cheap one better. That is a valid response too. I don't think either of them are bad. And that's the fun thing about all this. All right, so if you've made it this far in the video, then you must like recording as much as I do. I've put together a recording cheat sheet that will give you some of my best advice of things I've learned over the last couple of decades of recording music that will help you avoid some of the mistakes I've made and help you just get better recordings that will lead to better mixes, that will lead to a better body of work. And that's what we're all in it for. You can get that for free, 100% for free. Just enter your email address over at recordingcheatsheet.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.